to our next lecture in our final unit where we talk about the Phillips curve today. This will be on the test Friday, so make sure you pay attention and you take notes. Alright, so the Phillips curve. Again, I didn't alter this one too much. This isn't very long. Okay, it shows a trade-off between unemployment and inflation. Okay, so here we see the Phillips curve graph. You're going to need to learn this. You need to pause this and copy this graph down. Okay, and it shows the relationship between inflation and unemployment. And note, in the short run, there is no supply or demand. It's all short run and long run. All right, in the short run, it's inverse. Make sure you draw these curves correctly on the test, the last test we took. A lot of people were drawing the inverse curve incorrect, and I'm going to be a little bit more picky this time. Okay? So in a recession, we generally have low prices but high unemployment. And when we're in a boom or a overheating economy or in a positive output gap, depending on how they want to call it, we'll have high prices but low unemployment. Okay? And that's all in the short run. Alright, now, if for some reason aggregate supply should fall, okay, that's kind of what we're in right now, but not really. What happens is if you graph an aggregate supply, aggregate demand graph, okay, when aggregate supply shifts to the left, prices increase, but output decreases, okay? And this is called stagflation. Because if you're not producing enough, more than likely you're also in a recession. Okay, so you're going to have high unemployment and high prices at the same time. And that's like way bad. We don't want that. Okay, but it can be graphed. Now, when you're talking aggregate supply, you're going to be moving the entire short run Phillips curve. Okay, you're going to shift the whole thing. Alright. Alright, in the long run, there is no trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Because we're at full employment, we're producing our maximum output, we are 100% productive. Think of your production possibilities curve. We are on that line. Okay, so prices are generally around 5, 6, 7%. That's just pretty decent. And unemployment. So in the long run, we're right here. Okay, and we're at the natural rate of unemployment. Now you can just add the long run Phillips curve to your other graph if you want, or you could redraw this one. I don't care how you do it. It's completely up to you. Okay? Alright, so this is what we're going to show you. Here's our aggregate supply, aggregate demand graph, and here's our Phillips curve. Okay? Now, what you want, I would take a moment to pause this and draw both these graphs. Okay? Now, if aggregate demand increases, so we're talking about demand right here. This curve right here, the blue one. Note the yellow dot right here is equilibrium. This is where we're at right now. And long run is at equilibrium also. So we're all right here. Same thing, okay? So if it increases, of course, we shift demand to the right. Okay? Now, on the Phillips curve, we simply travel along the line. So when we're talking demand, we travel along the line right here. Okay? All right, our original equilibrium was the yellow dot. Our new equilibrium is the red. So here we have our original equilibrium, and then we shifted up here. Now, demand is going to raise prices, which is what happens. Note right here, price level is increasing, so that's what happens right here. And as demand increases and it's shifting to the right, we're going to increase output, and because of that reason, because we're increasing output, remember GDP and aggregate demand are the same thing, and it's all about output increasing. And because output is increasing, more people are working, okay, which is why unemployment falls or drops right here. Okay, so we just slide along the line. So somewhere in your notes, because remember, Friday's test is open note. When you shift demand on the Phillips curve, you stay along the short run Phillips curve line. You don't do anything else. Okay? All right, so now we have, okay, correctly draw an LRPC and SRPC with recessionary gap. What happens when aggregate demand falls? All right, so here we have an economy in a recession, and y'all need to mind this. A lot of people miss this part right here, okay, on that last test. If we are in a recession, that means equilibrium is below. We're right here. Is below the long run. We're back here. Okay? Green dots mean equilibrium. So over here, we're no longer right here. We can't be right here. That would be full employment. And if we're in a recession, unemployment is going to be high. So anywhere down on this line, you can put it. They just put it right here for aesthetic purposes. Okay? So aggregate demand is going to fall. That means it's going to decrease. That means it's going to shift left. Okay? And if it's shifting left, remember aggregate demand, we simply travel along the line. And since we're shifting left, we're producing less. Okay, so output will fall, which means we'll have more people unemployed. So that means we want our new dot to travel closer, or down in here. We want to show that that unemployment is rising. So that would go this way towards unemployment. And there it is right here. White dots are the new equilibrium. Okay? So in a recession, unemployment shifts downwards, towards the right. And in an inflationary gap or a positive output gap, it's going to travel more towards the inflation up here, more towards the y-axis. Okay? All right, so correctly draw the long-run Phillips curve and short-run Phillips curve at full employment. All right, so again, he's showing, we have the graph on the left, because by now you should know how to shift supply and demand on the supply and demand graph. Okay, now we're going to show you how that's why we keep showing you this. That way you can see it move here, so that you can see when you can see what happens to price level. Because remember, price level is inflation. If price level is increasing, then we have inflation. If price level is decreasing, then we have deflation. Okay, so what happens to price level here is going to tell us what to do here. Okay, all right, so here's your long run and short run Phillips curve at equilibrium. All right, now aggregate supply falls. So now we're talking here. Aggregate supply is going to shift to the left. Okay, yellow dot is our original equilibrium, green dot is the new one. Now, here's the trick to this. Okay, this means short run right here, because the short run is going to shift the whole thing. Okay, now what happened? Price level has increased, but output has decreased, which means we need to have inflation increase, but we also need unemployment to increase as well. Okay, this is stagflation. So we're going to shift the short run to the right. Okay? Green dots are our new equilibrium. All right, again, we have our supply and demand graph. We want you to correctly draw your long run and short run Phillips curve with a recessionary gap. Okay, and what happens when aggregate supply increases? Again, make sure you put your long run aggregate supply in the correct spot. Okay, and over here, this is how this would look. Same thing again. All right, we're in a recession. All right, this time aggregate supply is increasing. So aggregate supply is going to shift to the right. All right, green dots are original equilibrium. Yellow will be the new. Now, note, price level decreased, but output increased. Okay? So we need to reflect that when we shift our short run Phillips curve. So it will need to shift to the left. Okay? And here we have the representation. Inflation, we had deflation, it decreased, and unemployment decreased as well. Okay? All right. Now he's got this up here because these two are mirror images. All right. So you have your okay, your aggregate supply and aggregate demand graph. When you shift demand, so when we shift demand, we travel along the short run Phillips curve. Okay. Either way, if you're shifting demand to the right, you're going to travel up the curve. And if you're shifting demand to the left, you're going to shift down the curve. Write that down somewhere, okay? If aggregate demand shifts to the right, you're going to travel up the short run Phillips curve. If aggregate demand shifts to the left, you're going to travel down the short run Phillips curve, okay? All right, now, talking about supply. If aggregate supply shifts to the left, then the short run Phillips curve will shift to the right. Okay? Mirror image. When you shift the whole line, you're going to do the opposite direction you would on the aggregate supply, aggregate demand. Okay? If you're shifting aggregate supply to the right, the short run Phillips curve will shift to the left. Okay? All right, I'm trying to figure out what he's telling you here. Aggregate demand. Oh. This is stagflation. All right, so this is what's happening. Yellow dot. Sorry, excuse me. Yellow dot is our original equilibrium. Aggregate demand has shifted. So demand is increasing right here. So demand is shifting to the right. So when demand shifts to the right, we know our new short run will slide up the short run, right? Correct, yes. Okay. When aggregate supply shifts to the left, short run Phillips curve will shift to the right. And that's denoted by the white dots right there. That's what's going on here. Okay. All right. A short run Phillips curve shows an inverse relationship between what? Well, it's right here. If you are writing these graphs down, there's only two things you're writing, inflation and unemployment, right? Correct. So that's what we're looking for here. Inflation and unemployment. So B. There you go. An increase in aggregate demand will cause which of the following? Okay? So we know you're moving along the short run Phillips curve when it comes to demand. So A is correct. The long run Phillips curve become horizontal? No. The short run, Phillips curve to shift to the left. Nope, that's when aggregate supply shifts. So the long run, no, nope. So A should be the correct answer. Yep. All right, according to the short run Phillips curve, lower inflation rates are associated with higher unemployment. Because remember, the two are inverse. When one is low, the other is high. There you go. All right, practice this. Okay? The answer to this will be two graphs. You're only going to have two graphs. That's it. Yeah. Okay? I would highly recommend doing this. I cannot express how much this question needs to be completed by you on your own. If you have any questions, I highly recommend that you upload the answer to this question to me to check and see if it's right. I really, 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 really recommend that. I'm not going to require it though. And you need to let me know if you do. Same as Nostrum, I uploaded the FRQ on 5.2. Could you tell me if I graphed it correctly? And I'll let you know. And I'll give you your info back like I did on the test a couple weeks ago. Okay? All right, so all we got. Do 5.2a and 5.2b and get that turned into me. Okay? Have a good day. Thank you very much.